Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living, Victoria. If you're joining us for the first time today, my name is Carrie Hunter, and I'm the spiritual director of the center. While this is recorded, we are now meeting in person on Sundays at the Cook Street Village Activity Center, which is 380 Cook Street in Victoria. And we would love to welcome you there. Our services are at 11 a.m. on Sunday with a meditation at 10:30. And then we stay around for some fellowship and tea and coffee and goodies afterward. So today, I was thinking about a movie that I saw in the 1980s, and I happened to catch probably about the last third of it on TV one night a few weeks ago, and I had forgotten what a wonderful movie it was. It's called Cocoon. Don't know if you ever saw it. But if you didn't, here's a really quick synopsis. It's a story of two people who return to the earth. They're aliens who come back in human form, and they were once part of a settlement in Atlantis, and they left before Atlantis was destroyed. Not just these two people, but their entire race that had been at this outpost. And there were some of them who were in what they called cocoons. They were like big clamshells with moss over them. And this was how they birthed people of their race. So they couldn't take them with them on their ships when they left. And they put them in the ocean to just stay there until they could come back one day and take them somewhere where they could breathe life into them. Anyway, these two people came back and they rented a big house with a swimming pool, and they transferred the cocoons into the swimming pool and then energized the water so that their colleagues to be would be born from those cocoons. Now, it just happened that there was a senior citizens home that was right next door, and three of them discovered the swimming pool, and they decided they'd like to go for a swim. Three men. And the older people, the seniors in this film are just the greats of Hollywood past. They're, amazing actors, and it's a lot of fun, as well as having a sweet message to it as well. So anyway, they discovered the pool, they went for a swim, and they noticed they really felt better afterward. So they went back the next day and the next, and all of a sudden they're energized, and they're feeling like they're just young bucks again, and just wanting to get out and play and have a good time, and filled with energy and life. And other people in the home are wondering what on earth happened to them. Like, why are these guys suddenly so energetic, so filled with life, so filled with vigor? And so they finally discovered what the secret was, and all of them went to the pool. And I'm not going to give away the whole story here or even get into the entire story, but suffice it to say that toward the end, something happens where the cocoons cannot again be taken back to their home planet, or the beings that would be birthed, because so many people had been in the pool that they had used up the energy. And so as the two people from this other planet were preparing to leave, they told the seniors that they could come with them. And so they, the seniors talked about it, and this whole group of them decided to go, all but one person. And one couple who was going to go were saying goodbye to their grandson, and they were telling him that they weren't going to see him again. And it was a very poignant moment in the film. And they said that where they were going, they would never be sick, and they would never grow old, and they were never going to die. And I remembered that line so clearly because I had taken my daughters to see the film when it was playing. And for months afterward, they'd come running up to me and say, "Oh, you're never going to be sick, and you're never going to grow old, and you're never going to die." And we would just laugh and laugh and laugh. It was just a great line in the film. And as I was thinking about that today, as I'm recording this, I was thinking, there's really a metaphysical message in just about every story. And if we look at that from a metaphysical perspective, you're never going to be sick, you never grow old, and you're never going to die. Really, isn't that how we consider an afterlife to be? that we would exist in another plane of existence without illness, without aging. I mean, I've heard, I have no idea if it's true or not, but I've heard that we get to choose the age that we want to be. We get to choose the body we want to have, the shape that we want to have. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful after years of perhaps being self-critical about the way we look, to know that we would have that choice one day. And the thing is, we don't really know what that's going to be like. But I've had some interesting experiences and met some interesting people who talk about these things. Now, Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of our teaching, uh, and I've said this before, I've quoted him before. He wrote that he didn't believe in life after death, and when that would startle people, he would say, "I don't believe in death." He really believed in life everlasting, whatever that was going to look like. And I love something that the Dalai Lama wrote as well, where he said that he was really looking forward to the dying process because he thought it would be a really interesting experience. It's kind of like a big experiment, which of course meant that he didn't believe that he was ever going to die. He was going to go through this experiment, and then he was going to have a different kind of birth on the other side. And of course, in Buddhism, there's a belief in reincarnation as well, which I'll get to a little bit later on. So religious beliefs vary. I mean, there are so many religions on this planet, and many of them have very different interpretations of what's going to happen afterward. But in our belief system, we don't believe in heaven as a place somewhere up there, or hell as someplace down below where everybody's going to burn forever if they haven't lived a proper life or a good life. We believe that heaven and earth are right here, right now in our consciousness. We create that in our lives here and now. If we're, if we are really good people with the best intentions, the highest and best and spiritual people, chances are pretty good we're going to have a good life, kind of heaven on earth. And if life gets really challenging and difficult, we're creating our own hell on earth. And it's up to us to pull ourselves out of it, as I said last week and have said many times, when wonderful minister in our faith, Dr. Tom Costa, used to always say, when you're going through hell, don't stop, and don't build a condominium there. So I really love that. So it means that if we're in a place where we're terribly challenged, get out of it. Allow yourself to process through it, feel your feelings, but then get to the other side of it and create a happy life. Know that there is something better there and focus upon how that can be and what that will look like for you. So in terms of what it's like on the other side, I mean, I have no memory of it myself, but 30 years ago, I participated in a workshop on the island of Maui. And the leader of the workshop was a man named Luis Gasparetto, very interesting man from Brazil. And again, I won't get into the whole long story because it was a 3-day workshop, and there was an evening a couple of days before that was part of it as well. It was really fascinating. But Luis said that his father had passed away a couple of years before. And he said every night when he went to sleep that he would travel out, astral travel outside his body, would go to the other side and meet his father and would teach with him through the night. And then in the morning, he would come back into his body again and just resume his normal life here on earth. It's an interesting concept. And I recall reading a book, I think it was, I was thinking it was Dan Millman, but it wasn't. It was whoever wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and that the author's name's gone right out of my mind right now. But I remember him writing that that he and his wife practiced astral travel, and they really loved one another very deeply. And they said that they had decided that when they felt it was time to leave their physical forms, that they would sit down under a beautiful tree somewhere together, holding hands, and would allow themselves to travel out of their bodies as they had been practicing, and then to just stay on the other side, not to come back in. Again, if you haven't practiced this, or as I haven't, um, we don't really know how all of that works. But it's certainly interesting and worth reading about, I think, to see how we do feel about these things. I think the important thing is not to be afraid of them. When we get into fear about these things, then everything becomes negative. Instead, as Dr. Holmes said, stay open at the top. Allow yourself to be open to all kinds of new ideas and then see what comes in. And it can be a really exciting thing to practice. In Buddhism, um, there's a saying that it's easier to die than to stay dead. And I love that. Easier to die than to stay dead. So that means really that there is a rebirth afterward, and of course we know that Buddhists do believe in that. But I kind of like the way that is stated. Easier to die than to stay dead. It means we're going somewhere and we're going to be alive again. We're going to experience life of some kind again. Um, there are many books that have been written about near-death experiences where people have experienced something that's actually death, but they are revived from it. So many stories. I know a few of them personally, but one that really intrigued me that I read in a book a number of years ago was written by a pediatrician, and he wrote a book about children that he had treated who had had near-death experiences, and how when they came back to life, they came back on purpose. He said you could tell that each of them had a purpose, and they were determined to, they weren't just playing. They were back to fulfill something in their lives. One of the stories he told was about a mother and child who were driving along a highway, and they went to cross a bridge, and the mother drove the car off the bridge. And they were submerged in water for, it was estimated, at least a half hour, and had died. And there was someone walking across the bridge, and he heard a woman's voice call out saying, "Help me, help my baby, help my baby." The baby, if memory serves me, was actually about 5 or 6 years old. And the man looked over the side of the bridge and saw the submerged car, called 911, and help arrived, and they managed to um, get underwater to open the doors to pull out the mother and the child. And the mother had passed. And the man found it so extraordinary because he had heard her voice pleading for help. And it was estimated that she had been dead for about a half hour. And her little boy had also died, but he was resuscitated. The paramedics worked on him, and then they put him in an ambulance, took him to hospital. And when the little boy really regained his breath and was wide awake again, he could describe everything that happened. He said that he wasn't in the car. He was outside of the car. He was up above with his mom looking down at the car. And then he described the medics arriving and pulling the bodies out of the car. And he could describe absolutely everything that happened to him in the ambulance and at the hospital until he really woke up again. Extraordinary that we can be outside of our bodies. But the thing is, we're not our bodies. That's the thing that we always have to remember. We're so much more than our bodies. We're spirit having a human experience. And, who we are is not this physical form. We just happen to be inhabiting it at this time. It's a container. It's a container for our souls, a container for who we really are. Our persona, everything about us. That's the container. And we can give it up, or we can stay in it. And I'm not saying that we determine as we're going along in this life, well, okay, tomorrow's the day that I'm going to die, or pass over. I like to say cross over to the other side of the rainbow, um, but whatever your expression happens to be for leaving your physical form, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that when the time comes when something does happen where we're going to leave our physical forms, we don't have to be afraid of that. We don't have to worry about it. The thing is, it's those of us who are left behind who grieve the loss of those we love. But on the other side, it's a whole other experience for them. And again, I don't know what that is. But from the stories that I've read, from the books that I've read, they're really wonderful experiences. And Luis said that when he goes over to the other side at night to work with his father, he said, I've got a physical body, and he took hold of his shoulder and he clasped it, and he said, it's a tough physical form, just like I have here. And he said, and it's healthy. And he said, for people who die or cross over from an illness, there are green crystal healing chambers that they're placed in until they are healed, and then they can emerge and they can go on with another life on the other side, unless they choose to come back again, which gets us right into a whole other kettle of fish, so to speak. But I do know that it is possible for people who have passed to the other side to come back for a visit, maybe a brief visit, but they can come back. I've talked about this before. Ernest Holmes, as a curious man, went to seances for a while, and he saw spirits materialize into form. And there was one woman who came back fairly frequently, and he was a bit mischievous. And anyway, I'll shorten that story too, but he, one night when she reappeared, he asked her if, when she came back the next time, if they could weigh her and take her blood pressure and her heartbeat. And she said yes. So anyway, they had all of the equipment there. And the next time she showed up, they weighed her, they measured her heartbeat and took her blood pressure. And it was as if she were in absolute perfect human form. She had all of the attributes of a human. And then when she would disappear, she just kind of disappeared through a wall. So, Ernest Holmes was curious about everything. And I think that curiosity is so important, because when we're open to this, we have experiences that we otherwise might not. And I've shared with you, I think, that I had someone very close to me who passed. She was 19 years old. She was not my biological daughter, but she was a daughter of my heart. And Jessie had just come back from Calcutta, where she had worked in Mother Teresa's mission for 6 months. She volunteered there for 6 months, which was an amazing, loving experience that she had. And she came to me the night she came home. It was a Thursday night, and we had dinner, and she was all excited because she was going to register at UVic. And as I said, it was a Thursday, and on Friday morning she left for Vernon, where her biological mother lived and where her boyfriend lived. And she was going for a visit. On Sunday night, in the middle of the night, I woke up with my room just filled with dazzling light. And there was Jessie. And she was wearing this white mermaid gown, sort of tight fitting, which was very unlike Jessie, because she was always wearing kind of baggy shirts. She was 5'11", and she thought that she had big hips, which she didn't, but she thought she did. So she was always trying to cover her hips, and there she was in this white mermaid gown, and she was laughing, and she looked at me and she said, "Look, Mom, no hips." And I laughed so hard, and I was sitting up in bed, and we were both laughing. And then the light started to gradually fade, and she started to gradually fade. And I was sitting there in the dark, and I thought, what was that? What just happened? Was that a dream? But I'm awake? It didn't make any sense at all. And then the next day, her father called me with the tragic news that Jessie had been killed in a car accident on Sunday afternoon. Her boyfriend had driven through a stop sign, and she'd been instantly killed. And I was able to say, she came to me in the night, and she is so happy. That doesn't mean that it wasn't unbelievably painful, not just for a little bit, but for a long time. But she came to me in physical form. And in the days ahead, her dad said to me that when he was out walking in the woods or out in fields, which he liked to do, he said all of a sudden a hawk would fly up from under him because he would be walking and crying and calling out to God. And he said that this hawk would just come up out of nowhere, and he would hear Jesse's voice saying, "Oh, come on, Dad." And he said over and over again that happened. And he said, "I know that she came to me as that hawk." And we felt her presence. And I continue to feel her presence for a long time. And I still feel it from time to time. And it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. A friend of mine in Vancouver lost her son. He was a snowboarder. And she said, and in December, she said at his funeral, there was a mosquito that was hovering around her head. This was December in snow, and it kept hovering, and it wouldn't go away. And whenever she'd get in her car, this mosquito would be there. And one day, her ex-husband said to her, "Let's go up to Whistler and just visit the spot where our son used to like to snowboard." So they went up to Whistler. It was in January, and it was a cold day. And they were sitting on a bench, and all of a sudden, this mosquito emerged and circled around the two of them. And her ex-husband had not believed her when she said this mosquito was following her around. And she said, "That's our son. He's letting us know that he's here." And I have a dear friend that I lost like 2 years ago, actually. She was 56. And I know when she's around me because I smell her perfume. And it happened that we both loved the same perfume, and it isn't made anymore. It's a French perfume uh, that was very popular, before either of us was born. And we were still able to get it for many years, but it's been long gone now. But when she's visiting me, I smell her perfume. It happened at her celebration of life service that I did. And when I was coming, I could smell it everywhere. And then when I left and got on the ferry, I'd sort of forgotten about it, and I was standing in line for the buffet on the ferry, and all of a sudden the fragrance was all around me again, and I thought, oh, she's just letting me know that she's here, because I know that fragrance is not something that is available anywhere anymore, and it would just be too much of a fluke that I would smell it in different places in the room where her service was conducted, and then again on the ferry, and then when I got home. So it's about paying attention to these things, knowing that there is something greater than we are, and allowing our loved ones to connect with us without being afraid. In whatever way they want to. We'll recognize it when it happens and talk to them. And ask questions. I talked to Dr. Holmes. I never knew him, but when I have a question, a big question, I'll just say, "I just really, really wish that I could talk to you. That's the question that I would ask you." And within 2 weeks, somebody will show up, and we'll be talking, or we'll do something, and all of a sudden the answer to my question will be there. Allow yourself to believe. As Ernest Holmes said, remain open at the top. Allow yourself to be open to all of life's possibilities, whatever they might be. And again, part of my title today, the title was Life, Death, and What About Reincarnation? Well, what about reincarnation? I don't know. I don't know about you. Sometimes I don't know about me either. But I do remember when my daughter, Kendall, was about 11 years old. No, she was about 8. She came home from school one day and she asked me if I believed in reincarnation. That word had never even passed my lips around her, and I didn't think to ask her how she knew the word. And I said, well, I guess it's possible. Or I said, maybe, since everything is energy, possibly some people are more sensitive to energy and they pick up whole lives of people who've gone before. And she was just sitting there on the cupboard top. I was making some cookies. She was sitting there on the cupboard top looking at me, and she said, "Oh, but I've always known it was true." And I said, "Well, then I guess we better get some books and I better find out more about it." And, and I did read about it, but I personally didn't know whether or not I really believed in it or not. And, books fall off shelves. The first book that I read was The Psychic Lives of Taylor Caldwell. wonderful author who wrote many, many books, basically channeled the books of fiction. And everyone thought that she did the most wonderful research, but in fact, she didn't research anything. She just sat down and wrote. I think Dear and Glorious Physician was one where doctors said they couldn't understand how somebody who was not a doctor could know that much. Anyway, she was regressed through 33 past lives, and she was hypnotized. And she was told she wouldn't remember any of them until it was all over with. And what I remember, there were several that I remember specifically, but one in particular, she remembered being, I think she called herself a char in an old castle, and she said that she was scrubbing down the stone stairs in the castle one day when the lord of the castle came home, and he was angry, and she was in his way, he thought, and he pushed her aside, and then he cuffed her about the ears, and one of her ears started to bleed. And in this life, she was very hard of hearing. But after she'd been regressed through that life, her hearing came back. And I mean, I won't go through a whole lot of the lives, but another one that I remembered was that she was always cold. No matter where she lived, she was always cold, and she always wore sweaters, even in the hottest days of summer. But when she would go to Hawaii, um, all of a sudden she would be comfortable. She wouldn't, she could wear sleeveless dresses and so on. Never felt the heat. And she was regressed through an incredibly happy life in Hawaii. I don't remember which island it was. But after she was regressed, she wasn't cold any longer. And so there's a theory that when we are regressed through past lives, that a healing takes place. It happened actually with my other daughter, who had a very painful knee, and she was a marathon runner, and she didn't think she could run anymore because of it. And she was regressed through some past lives in New York many years ago, and she was told that she'd been a soldier in the First World War and had been shot in the knee, and her leg had been amputated at the knee, and that she still was suffering the pain of that today. And that was why she couldn't run. But after that regression, she could run again. So it's mysterious, we just don't know. And I've probably shared. I mean, Wayne Dyer, his last book was called Memories of Heaven, and I shared a story in it. My grandson's story is in it. One of his stories. He had many, many stories. But when he was 4 and his little brother Noah was 2, I was visiting, and Jake was eating his cereal in the morning, and we were just chatting, and all of a sudden he looked at me and he said, "You're all gold like Noah and me." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You're all gold, and Mama's blue and Daddy's green." And he said, "But you've got a big blue light coming out of your forehead." And he came over and he pushed my hair back, and he's looking at my forehead, and my daughter said, "Oh, he sees auras." And I said, "Oh, okay." Then he sat down and he said, "In my past life, I died in quicksand, and Mama died trying to save me." And he said Noah didn't die, so he was really, really scared because we left him. And he said this time when we were going to be born again, we decided to have Mom and Dad for our parents again. And he said Noah was supposed to come first. This is a little 4-year-old telling me this. Noah was supposed to come first, and I was supposed to come after him, but he was so scared because we left him before that he said, "You got to go first, and I'll come afterward." And so Jake said, "Okay, but you better come soon afterward." And he said, so that's what we did. And Noah's sitting there nodding his little head. Noah, age 2. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, where were you when you decided to have Mom and Dad for your parents again?" And he said, "Well, we were up there looking down on them. Where else would we be?" And I said, "Well, I was just kind of curious." The thing is, I mean, I have many, many stories about him and his experiences that he remembered up until he was 11 years old. And one day we were out walking around Lake Minnewanka near Banff, and he stopped and stared, and I said, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "I'm watching my past life. I used to be an Indian, and I rode my horse through here." And he was just absolutely amazed and thrilled. So that was just a sort of a normal day in the life of Jake. But the thing is, it made me again think about these things, especially when people are healed from those kinds of experiences. And one of my daughters said to me recently, "Oh, you believe in reincarnation." And I said, "But, I really don't know." I said, "Certainly I've heard of so many experiences. And in our family, we've heard these stories. But again, is this just energy that someone is picking up, or is it real?" And, it doesn't even matter. It's a matter of curiosity. If you want to know about it, then explore it, whatever it is. But the most important question, I think, really is there a life before death? How are we living these precious lives? Are we really valuing them? Are we really just deciding we're just going to be the best that we can be absolutely every single day? There's an expression, learn as if you'll live forever, and live as if you'll die tomorrow. Think about that. That is, about being a constant student of everything, but also about living life to the full every single day. And when we do, I really think we'll reach the place where we'll never be sick, and we'll never grow old, and we're never going to die. We'll be on that other side, living life eternally and joyfully. And so it is. Have a wonderful week. It's lovely having you here with us. I hope you've enjoyed today, and that you'll come back in person to our center, or else back online in the future. And we appreciate all of the gifts that you give us. It certainly has kept our center alive during this 9 months that we've been shut down. And so if you would like to make a contribution to us today, we'd be very grateful for that. You can e-transfer to donate@cslvictoria.org. That's donate@cslvictoria.org. Or you can go online to our website at www.cslvictoria.org. And there's a button there that says donate, which allows you to either make a donation through PayPal or through a credit card. We so appreciate all that you give and appreciate all that you do in this world. I just say thank you for joining us today, and I give you many blessings as you go forward into this coming week. Have a great one, and so it is. Bye for now.